And it just became fun to see how you can create diets that meet animals' needs and fulfill their desires to eat fresh food. You can rotate diets, but if they're all deficient in the same things, guess what? The diet is still deficient in those things, even though you've rotated foods. If my patients have chronic nutrient deficiencies, I'm setting them up at risk for degenerative disease. My stance is always, if I know that there's a minimum requirement, I'm going to meet it to try to do everything I can to make sure that the diet I'm feeding didn't cause some of these degenerative diseases. May they still happen? Sure, they might, because of our environments, because of their genetics. But if I can control the dietary component, I'm going to take that off the table as a potential contributing factor to some of these degenerative diseases. My best friend in the whole world is Dr. Karen Becker. I was also neighbors with Steve Brown, who's Karen's other really good friend. Steve was my literal next door neighbor. So I was so lucky that I got to get up in the morning and toddle on over to Steve's house and sit next to him and learn how to formulate diets from the guy who created the fresh food segment of the dog food world.
I'm a dog owner. I really want to cook for my dog. Is there an easy way, instead of me just going off and asking Facebook, to formulate a recipe that is not done in a way that I need to spend 15 hours a week cooking for my dog?
Welcome to the DAFY podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert.
Susan, welcome to the DAFY podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So, Susan, the first question I always ask is, why is it that you love dog health and nutrition so much?
Well, being a veterinarian now for, how many years is it? 29 years almost. Obviously, I care very deeply about animal health. And along my journey in veterinary medicine, I started off very conventionally, and then along the way became frustrated with the availability of options to me just not being enough to really bring about health and vitality. And so that led me to look deeper into nutrition. And once you start focusing on nutrition and you see the difference it makes, how can you not be passionate about it? It's just a natural flow from seeing what it can do.
Yeah. Food is medicine, isn't it? I will always live by that, I think.
Yeah. It can help or it can harm. And so we have the potential to make really good choices. So I'm, by default, I'm kind of a maximizer. Like, let's do the best we can with what we have. And let's make nutrition the best we can make it. And I'll go off on a tangent already. I'm doing it right off the bat. Here I go. Sometimes I think people feel overwhelmed and intimidated if they can't do everything perfectly, whatever that means, because you're going to get a different version of perfect from whoever you ask, right? And so then they think, well, I just won't do anything because I can't do it all. And I just want to encourage people to know that every improvement they make bears dividends in their animal's health. So you'll see it in your dog. Even if you can't do everything that you think you should be doing or want to be doing, anything you can do will make a difference nutritionally.
Yeah. That was one of my questions I was going to ask you. Is like, because it's such a small, it looks like it's such a small little thing, but when you actually, exactly what you said, you start seeing the difference that makes, like adding an ingredient, adding a little bit more omega-3 to your dog that is eating like, I don't know, a little bit more like of ultra-processed food all their life, the difference it makes. And that's why when you start seeing the results, then it just proves how important it is, right, for our dogs and for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's beautiful to watch. Sometimes people come to this because they start looking at their own diet and they're like, oh gosh, maybe it makes a difference for my dog too, or vice versa. Sometimes people have horrible diets themselves, but then they start really working on their dog's diet and they think, gosh, maybe I should do this for myself as well. So I love seeing that go both ways.
I completely agree. I was talking to a dog owner yesterday about that one, and she was like, yes, I had all my, recipes formulated by a nutritionist, and actually like they made me realize how bad my own diet is and the amount of changes I've made over the last couple of years just with my own health. And that's another reason we should be grateful to our dogs, right? because we
Yeah.
don't think about that. But in the world we live in today, so toxic, we have, so many things that can really harm us. And just a little thing like that we can kind of take as an inspiration from our dogs and the love that we share for them is just so amazing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. They're family, and when you start taking care of your family, then everybody in the family benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. And so, how is it? So, you said that you've been a vet for almost 30 years now. What was the biggest thing that kind of made you go, like, I don't want to just stay as a vet, work as a vet for the rest of my life, and I want to move into? I mean, I know you've mentioned, that you've seen biggest differences when, nutrition was prioritized. Can you give me some example of that kind of inspired you to do what you do today?
Yeah. So my departure from traditional conventional veterinary medicine kind of came around the same time when I had young children, and same thing, right? I was very attuned to what was going into their tiny little bodies, and then that made that light bulb go off for me. Oh golly, it makes a difference for these other furry little tiny bodies that I'm dealing with every day here. So that kind of happened around the same time as I took the coursework and became certified in veterinary spinal manipulation therapy, or chiropractic. And if you work with any human chiropractors, you know that they're oftentimes very focused on nutrition and the benefits and potential harms that can come from what you put in your body. So that was kind of a natural fit that really made my interest in nutrition take off. And so I started, of course, as we all do, with experimenting on my own animals and transitioned them all to fresh food diets, and saw huge changes in not just their health, but how they looked visually, the shinier coat and skin and all that. But also at the time I had this little Chihuahua Pomeranian mix. He weighed 4 pounds. His name was Larry. He was the best dog on the face of the earth. And Larry was a typical kibble fed dog until I started this journey. And I transitioned him to fresh food. And all of a sudden, he went from looking like, you know how when men are middle-aged and they start to get a little bit of a dad belly and they've got little teeny skinny legs? That's what Larry looked like. And then I put him on fresh food, and all of a sudden he was like, and his exercise routine didn't change at all. It was just diet. And I could see muscle definition in him. And he wasn't ever fat. He just had a weird body shape. And then when he went to fresh food, he had the body shape he was meant to have, and he had muscle definition and all that stuff. So that I was really like, wow, look at that. Like I can see it, So then as I gained confidence with that, then I started helping my clients do the same thing. And I went through a bunch of different career changes throughout that time. I won't go too much into this, but maybe you've touched on this before, but I think a lot of people are aware of the emotional cost of veterinary medicine for veterinarians, and that for professional, they have the highest rate of suicide of any professional group, veterinarians do. So I'm fortunate to say that I was never so profoundly affected that I was in a position that I would consider that, but I knew that it wasn't good for me and for my health to stay in the specific environment that I was in. So I started looking at other ways that I could use my knowledge, my experience, my skills to still help animals, but in a way that preserved and maximized my own well-being. And so I had the great fortune of teaching vet tech students for 7 years. That was great. And I was the program director, so I had the freedom to introduce integrative things into the curriculum. So, they had the full conventional required curriculum, but we also talked a lot about fresh food nutrition and other modalities that can be helpful in maintaining and preserving and promoting great vitality and health. And then when I moved to Arizona, my best friend in the whole world is Karen Becker, Dr. Karen Becker. And I got, yep, Forever Dog Life. There it is. And so I got to be living in close community with her. I was neighbors with Karen and also neighbors with Steve Brown, who's Karen's other really good friend. Excuse me. Steve was my literal next door neighbor. So I was so lucky that I got to just, get up in the morning and take my cup of coffee and toddle on over to Steve's house and sit next to him and learn how to formulate diets from the guy who created the fresh food segment of the dog food world, right? So he made the very first complete and balanced fresh food diet. He created this whole big Excel spreadsheet that, to be honest, scares the bejeebers out of me. Like every time he opens up his Excel spreadsheet, I'm like, this is terrifying. Just close it. I can't even look at it. But from what he created, Animal Diet Formulator was made, and I learned how to use that. And for me, that's a very intuitive, very easy to use tool. And it just became fun to see how you can create diets that meet animals' needs and fulfill their desires to eat fresh food. And you can just see all those benefits that happen. So I don't even remember what your original question was, but hopefully
No,
I
but this
answered
is
it
so
in there.
inspiring. So wherever you went with it, it's amazing. I absolutely love that. And that's so interesting to hear about your background and the fact that you and Karen Becker were like, I thought you were sisters once. Because you see, your surname is pretty close. I'm foreign. I'm Italian. English is not my first language. And for a while, like when I keep seeing pictures on your Facebook and things like that, they're definitely sisters.
We get that all the time,
Really?
all the time. Yeah. Well, we met on the first day of vet school, actually vet school orientation day we
Really?
met. Yes. So however many years ago that is,
Wow.
33 or something like that. And we have just been best friends ever since. And so we do get, are you sisters a lot? Or
Yeah.
people like mash us into the same person. Like they'll say, you must be Dr. Susan Becker, or you must be Dr. Karen Recker. So yeah, it's
Absolutely
all,
hilarious.
now we just say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Oh, we pretty much are, right? We live
Yeah.
like pretty much close to each other. So that's amazing. I love that. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, I love the context behind it because I think it kind of teaches as well people that are listening to these, like, the story behind the person that is talking. And I think that's also really important because every time I talk to kind of an integrative vet or holistic vet, there is always a story behind. And I always try to find that out because it's, most of the time it's inspiring. It's either something that happened, something that, that changed the way they look at things. And I always kind of like to see, like, I like to see that because I think a lot of people that even dog owners that go and move to fresh feeding is at the end of the day is they either have a dog that have a specific health issue, or I see it all the time, or cancer or diabetes or this. What can I do for my dog that has got this? Because all we care about is for them to live a long, happy, healthy life at the end of the day, right? So yeah, I love that. And can you tell the audience what is owners that don't know what you do, right? Because you mentioned Animal Diet Formulator. How do you describe what you do as a formulator of food diets?
Yeah. So formulation of a diet means putting together ingredients that provide nutrients that dogs need. And so there's more that goes into that than you might think when you first think about it. And I think that's because a lot of people relate it to how they feed themselves, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we eat for the most part fresh food diets, unless we're all eating ultra processed food, which is very prevalent, unfortunately. And this is sometimes the critique you'll hear against formulating diets. People will say, well, you don't formulate for yourself, you don't have to do it for your dog. So when I first got into this and I heard that statement, I thought, well, I mean, there's some validity to that. So let me just check out what my diet looks like. So I logged my diet for 2 weeks, and going into it, I was like, I got this. I mean, I eat fresh food. I eat a wide variety. I eat really good food, and I'm really conscious of what I'm putting in my body. Well, let me tell you what, I had consistent deficiencies across the board because even though I was eating a wide diversity of food, I wasn't necessarily eating the foods that brought specific nutrients to the table. And that's the same thing that can happen in dog diets. You can rotate diets, but if they're all deficient in the same things, guess what? The diet is still deficient in those things, even though you've rotated foods. So formulating diets means putting together ingredients to meet all nutrient needs, essential nutrients, which means nutrients that the dog's body can't make on its own and has to be gotten through food. So we provide those in the right amounts. The other part of that is not necessarily intuitive. Here, my cat's going to join us for the...
Hello, little kitten.
She might push some buttons, but that's okay. The other part of that is...
We'll do a clip on that.
is that we have to take into account how many calories are in the diet. So that's the other thing that some of us may be more familiar with counting calories for ourselves, but not in the context of how many nutrients are there per calorie. So if we're designing a diet that's going to meet an individual dog's needs, it has to provide all the nutrients they need in the amount they need within the calorie package that they need. And that's where things get dicey. You can say, well, I'm going to use, chicken and eggs as my protein source, so I'll put those in and that's covered. Well, is it? Because are they getting the number of grams of protein they need in the calories they need? Or are you counting on just the fact that a protein source is in the diet and so the protein's been met? Or You can say that for any nutrient, for manganese, for iodine, for vitamin D. Just because you have a source of that nutrient in the diet, is there enough that they're going to actually consume in a day to get their needs met? Maybe, but maybe not. So formulation of a diet takes into account all of those types of things, as well as choosing specific ingredients that have functional benefits for that animal in front of you. So you can choose a whole bunch of different ingredients to meet a specific nutrient, but if you select one that is going to do double duty and provide other benefits for the animal eating that diet, then it's a win-win. You've met their nutrient needs and you've provided some other benefit. Like maybe you're going to use turmeric as your source of manganese. So you're meeting their essential need for manganese and you're also providing some great anti-inflammatory benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely love that. And you mentioned two things that are really, really important. One is the rotational part, and the second one is calories. So let's break down both of those, right? So I am part of give an example. I'm part of a big Facebook group. It's called something about homemade dog food. This group has got 400,000 people in it, which is what I said to you just before we started recording, right? It's crazy how many people, how many dog parents really want to cook for their dogs nowadays. The problem I've got is I scroll through, and obviously I'm just a certified canine nutritionist. I have a good understanding. I'm not a formulator or anything like that, but I've got knowledge around, basic nutrients and things like that. And I see like comments and posts, and they make me freak out. Generally, they really do make me freak out. Like, even when I said to people like, just tell me, what your concerns are about homemade diets, because I always try to just refer them to the people that actually know what they're talking about. And everyone is like, we're just rotating. Like, as we're rotating lots of different proteins, lots of different vegetables, lots of different, omega-3 sources. And, that's what we do. What is the problem with that, in your opinion? Like a rotational diet or variety and things like that, like it's called different now. What's the problem with that?
Most of the time, people are rotating between diets that have the same deficiencies. So, if I need 5 things and I'm going to feed one diet that has these 4 things and one diet that has these 3 things and then one diet that has these 2 things, I've still never gotten this thing ever. And that's what I see most of the time. So my cat is pushing all sorts of buttons on my other keyboard. Sarah, can you move, please? Thank you.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you. So that's the big issue. And that kind of relates to the feeding philosophy of, prey model and that kind of thing, where let's just feed dogs what they were evolutionarily designed to eat. And I'll feed 80-10-10 or something like that. And I get that premise. Where it misses something in terms of providing complete nutrition is we don't typically have access to all the parts that dogs would eat when they were scavenging. So, those dogs were eating, it sounds gross, but they were eating eyeballs and brains and testicles and teeth and things like that we can't feed now for the most part. And so we're missing out on some of those nutrients. And even if once in a while I have somebody come to me and be like, I got a goat head, I'm going to feed, tip to tail nutrition and I'm going to get it covered. Can you verify for me that my dog's diet is now complete? I can't. And the reason is we don't have any data on goat heads.
Yes.
I don't know what nutrients are in there. So I can't say for sure that, if you feed that once a week or once a month or whatever, it's going to cover those bases. I still don't know that. So for me, as a veterinarian, I know that if my patients have chronic nutrient deficiencies, I'm setting them up at risk for degenerative disease.
Yes.
So I can't do that. I cannot recommend, it's probably fine, it's probably meeting the needs of the dog. I can't do that. Some people might be confident and comfortable with that. I'm not. That feels like too much responsibility for me, where I could cause harm to an animal and I just can't sleep at night doing that. So for me, I need to know that I am covering that animal's nutrient bases and that I can prove it. And so for me, rotation by itself is not enough. Rotation of diets that have been formulated so you know exactly what you're getting, and putting together a rotational plan that makes sure all of the essential nutrient needs are met, right on. You got it. Let's do it. Yeah, but those are different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think it's like that's what most people kind of like struggle with, is because they really want to do it, but then either they go online and find recipes that are just randomly put together. And I think, the implication of that being, they're not complete and balanced. They're not formulated by someone who actually, like uses a software that, know that You know, the recipe actually has all the minerals and vitamins and the amino acids and everything that the dogs needs to thrive. And that's the problem. So to help out dog owners in this kind of scenario, right? So I'm a dog owner. I really want to cook for my dog. I don't want to be, like adding 30 ingredients in my recipe. Is there an easy way, instead of me just going off and asking Facebook, to formulate a recipe, or maybe like you said, 3 or 4 recipes that I can rotate if I want to? That is not done in a way that I need to spend, I don't know, 15 hours a week cooking for my dog, basically.
Yeah. I mean, there is no, that I'm aware of, there is no easy shortcut to be like, just do this and you'll be fine. Be very leery of recipes you find that aren't specific. So I know it's very attractive and enticing to find a recipe that says, use 5 pounds of meat and 3 pounds of vegetables. Well, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately, because each protein source brings its whole own host of nutrients to the table. And the biggest factor there is fat content. So even if the recipe said use 5 pounds of turkey, okay, great. Well, 99% fat-free turkey, 93% lean turkey, all dark meat turkey, all white meat turkey, with skin, without skin. What are we talking? Because all of those factors influence the fat content, and that in turn influences the calories, and that in turn influences whether or not the dog is going to consume enough nutrients in their calorie allotment. So the recipe has to be specific. You might have some veggies that could be interchangeable, but you can't ever have proteins that are across the board interchangeable. It won't work. If there aren't organs included, you're probably going to have to use some synthetic nutrients to meet the nutrients that are missing from those organs. And that's okay. Sometimes I hear that from people too. Well, I want a very simple recipe with few ingredients, and it has to be all whole foods, no synthetics. Yeah, I don't know if I can do that for you, because those whole foods, again, they have those nutrients in them, but sometimes you have to add so much of them that you end up serving, a quiche that's 57% spinach or something like that. And that's just not necessarily in line with the other goals we have for the recipe. The recipe has to be specific, and it has to provide nutrients in the proper amounts, which sometimes is going to mean synthetic vitamins or minerals, depending on the recipe. And particularly for less active animals who have to consume a smaller amount of calories, oftentimes we have to use synthetics to get adequate concentrations of those nutrients in. So be leery of recipes that are not specific, or that say you can interchange anything you want. You can't. Be leery of recipes that don't give specifics on supplements. So sometimes I see some that say add 1 teaspoon kelp. Which kelp? Because some kelp has crazy high iodine amounts in it. Some kelp has almost none. So which kelp you use makes a difference. Add vitamin D. Add 1 tablet vitamin D. 400 IUs of vitamin D, 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, 50, what? How much? How much are we talking? So those are the specifics that you need to know and need to look at in a recipe to know that recipe has actually covered those bases. And if you see those things, again, that's not a guarantee that it's complete and balanced. Particularly, it's not guaranteed that it's complete and balanced at the calorie intake that your dog needs. So just briefly, I'll explain what I mean by that. I can formulate a recipe for a super active dog that needs to eat 1,500 calories a day, and I can make sure he's got all his adequate nutrients in there. If I feed that recipe to a dog who only needs 800 calories a day, he's only getting 55 or 60% of the calories that active dog was getting. He might only be getting 55 or 60% of the nutrients as well. So recipes are not interchangeable across the board for every dog out there. And then, of course, there's the issue of growth versus adult. Puppy food is not adult food. Adult food is not puppy food. So those are specific things there. So we've got stage of development, and we also have activity level. Both of those things go into determining what the formulation needs to look like.
So it's such an interesting point. So essentially, in the example they just made about 1,500 calories a day, I have a dog that is less active. What that means essentially is, the less active dogs is burning way less calories, and then you're just feeding the same amount. That's not going to work. Would the dog just put weight on? The second dog?
Yeah. So the second dog who's less active, if you feed him 1,500 calories, but he only needs 800, he's going to become morbidly obese in not very much time, which is also not good for his health. So And what I like about homemade diets is we can formulate specifically for an individual animal. If we look at foods that are just AAFCO complete and balanced, that's great, but that is a benchmark of really highly active dogs. So if we feed less of that AAFCO complete and balanced food, those less active dogs are left with nutrient deficiencies. So
Yes.
oftentimes when we pull a food off the shelf, our two choices are, do I want to feed my dog enough that he gets all his nutrients met and then he's fat? Or do I want to feed my dog the appropriate amount of calories for his activity level and then he's nutrient deficient? Which one do I want? Well, personally, I want neither of those. I don't like the sounds of either one.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I think that's something people just don't understand. And another one that people don't understand is when a dog is poorly, like allergies, like cancer or, any other problem, right? That just wants you to, home cook for your dog. And again, I see that all the time. My dog has just got diagnosed with cancer. All I see is I just don't want to give them any carbs, things like that. And I'm like, okay, that might be true. Fair enough. But it's like, you can't just make up a recipe, especially for a dog who has just been diagnosed with cancer, because their nutritional requirements is going to be even more important. And making sure they get all of these nutrients in that food is going to be even more important than a healthy dog, right? And it's just letting people understand that, it's the hard part. So question for you about, like, in general diets, right? So when again, I'm just putting myself here, like, I'm a dog owner, I want to home cook for my dog. Is there a case where I can work with someone like you, where I can create like a basic recipe with, like, I don't know, 8-10 ingredients, I say whole food ingredients, and then is there an option for me as a dog owner to go and purchase some kind of like mixed supplement, like vitamin and minerals together, whether you buy that in the US and whether that is in the ADF as an ingredient? But you know what I mean? Like, do you guys work with like a supplement companies that, you can say, I'm going to formulate this recipe, I've got this supplement in the database, I can work out whether that will make the food, like, would that basically match what the dog needs?
Yeah, so there are a lot of those types of mixes. And what I have found so far is they almost never work as labeled. So, like, the mix will say, use X number of ounces of meat, X number of ounces of veggies, add this fat, add 2 scoops of our supplement. The vast majority of the time, some things are still deficient and some are excessive. I have not found any that fit into that sweet spot perfectly. Again, this is activity level dependent. So it might work if you have that super active dog. Then it might work. If one works for a less active dog, it's not going to work for the super active dog, because then it's going to provide too many nutrients for that super active dog. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in my experience, there really is no one size fits all that fits anybody well. Yeah.
So the best thing would be just develop it with someone and then stick to it for your dog, as opposed to, just get like a generic one. Yeah, it's so interesting. And then what is a less active dog? Because I know you are very passionate about this. Just to give the audience a bit of context, I met Susan for Rusty 3 years ago when I was at home cooking for him. And I remember us having this conversation about, what I thought was a active dog. It's actually not. So what is an active dog and not an active dog? Because I think people get it like, I'll take my dog out for an hour and a half and then he sleeps all day. But for me, that's hour and a half is very good compared to some of my old clients that we used to just take the dog round the block. So that's for me a less active dog. But apparently that's not the case, right?
Yeah. So I referenced AAFCO being set for active dogs. So that's what's considered active, is theirs. And just for baseline, for most dogs, what that looks like is 3 to 6 hours of vigorous activity per day. I don't know any dogs who are that active. I mean, maybe I know of a couple working, herding dogs who might fall into that category. Most of the dogs who live in the house and are companion animals are like you said with Rusty, or with like my dog, Alice. She gets walked about an hour or so a day. And for the rest of the time, she'll go out in the backyard and nose around and check things out. But other than that, she's just kind of hanging out. So in ADF, we have kind of arbitrary activity levels set. These are not standardized across the industry. So just so everybody knows, it's not like there is a list that is gospel. The only things that are set are what AAFCO's at, what NRC's at, and what FEDIAF is at. FEDIAF is the European version of AAFCO. And I like FEDIAF because they do recognize a less active profile and an active profile. Kudos to them for helping people see, okay, we need more nutrients per calorie for that less active. And here's a framework that you can actually provide that to your customers in. So anyway, I digress. But so those activity levels, active is where all of those are set for their regular feeding. They're all super active, 3 to 6 hours vigorous activity per day. Less active for FEDIAF is actually still pretty active. It's like 2 hours or more per day of vigorous activity. And then we get down into the area where, in my experience, 80 to 90% of dogs actually are, which is less active than less active, right? So we have different names for them, like indoor sedentary or ADF indoor sedentary or weight loss, which doesn't necessarily mean they have to lose weight. They just might be at that low a calorie expenditure level. Even if we're not trying to get them to lose weight, we might be feeding them at what's considered resting energy requirement. And this is all individual. So like I can listen to somebody describe what their dog's activity level is per day, and I can make an educated guess about which one of those categories I would choose. But that dog may need more or less than that. So we pick a starting point, we feed them at that level, and we see what happens. He's losing weight. Okay, he needs more. He's burning more calories than expected at his activity level. Okay, we'll feed him more. He's gaining weight on that level. Okay, he's burning fewer calories than we expected. We're going to dial it back and revamp his recipe to fit his nutrient needs into that less active. So these categories all are aligned with a multiplier, an activity level multiplier. So we figure out what that dog's metabolic body weight is, which means their weight in kilograms taken to the 3/4 power, and that accounts for surface area and energy burn as opposed to just strictly weight. And then we multiply this by this factor. So for reference, AAFCO is at 132. That's their activity level multiplier.
Yeah.
I feed my dog at 85.
Wow.
Yeah. FEDIAF less active is 95.
Wow.
FEDIAF active is 110. So there's all these different gradations. Again, those are just arbitrary categories and names we've given to them. I can design a diet for any activity level multiplier. It doesn't have to be 80 or 85 or 95. It can be, 67. It can be any number at all that fits what that dog needs. But that's how these formulations come about, is we try to figure out what activity level they are. We use that multiplier to determine calories, and then we figure out how to fit all their nutrient needs, which again are based on their metabolic weight times the requirement for that nutrient per day. We fit that into the calorie package they need.
Yeah. That's interesting. And how do I know as a dog owner, like, is there a way for me to work that out? Is there a website I can go to work it out based on, the level of activity that my dog, does every day? Do you have that on your website?
So if you subscribe to ADF, you can use our website to assess diets if the manufacturer provides a complete nutrient analysis. This is a big if. A lot of manufacturers out there don't. They provide the guaranteed analysis, and people will say that to me all the time. Yeah, sure they do. It's right here. Here's protein, fat, moisture, ash. Yeah, that's not it. I need to know how much manganese, how much vitamin D, how much calcium, how much phosphorus, how much vitamin E, all of the essential nutrients, including amino acids, fatty acids, all of them need to be presented so that you can accurately assess the diet and whether or not it will work for your dog. And it may not work for your dog as is, but maybe it works if you use that diet, but you leave a little bit of calorie room to add an egg, and then now it's complete and balanced, something like that. So if you have an ADF subscription, you can enter a food as an ingredient, create a recipe using that food, and then see how it meets or does not meet your dog's nutrient needs depending on their activity level. And then you can add foods to it to make it complete and balanced if it needs them.
Yeah, it's so interesting because no one provides that information nowadays. And so we pretty much don't know that, right? Like I can be feeding, it's like Rusty's on a raw diet, and I just use the the 3% of his body weight, because they do put like calories per 100 grams, but again, you don't know which activity level they're using, right? So I don't know if I should, like, and actually, technically, if I use theirs, like they asked me to feed him almost 100 grams more a day, which I don't. I do. But then again, can I be, like not voluntarily, but like getting him to have less nutrient than what he needs in his diet just by feeding him less. And that's something people really don't understand. I started to understand this a couple of years ago now. But, what is the implication? Let's talk about the implication of whether it's a homemade diet or whether it's a commercial diet that you're feeding your dog. What is the long-term implication of, our dogs being deficient of specific nutrients, which, by the way, we don't have a clue what they are, right? Because unless you're formulating a recipe or you're working for that company, you don't have a clue what they are. What happens to these dogs?
Yeah.
When that happens?
So there haven't been a lot of studies that show this. The conspiracy theory in me thinks sometimes that that's intentional. Like if we don't have any proof that these chronic nutrient deficiencies are causing degenerative disease, then we don't have to address it, right? But it stands to reason that, okay, so we know that protein, for example, is critical for all muscle function. Well, the heart is a muscle. So how many of these dogs out there with cardiomyopathy have been either protein as a whole deficient or specific amino acid deficient for a long length of time? And did that contribute to their heart disease? Maybe it did. I don't know. Phosphorus is one that for adult dogs is frequently excessive, not deficient, but excessive. We know that's a risk factor for kidney disease. How many of those dogs walking around out there with chronic kidney disease have a contributing factor of excess phosphorus in their diet for their whole lives, setting them up for that kidney disease? I don't know, but it could be significant. Hypothyroidism resulting from inadequate iodine intake. Is that from diet? Could be. Maybe it is in some cases, maybe it's not. Choline deficiency, that's a big one. A lot of diets are deficient in choline. Choline is crucial for neurotransmitters. So as dogs develop cognitive dysfunction as they age, could part of that be dietary related? Maybe so. So my stance is always, if I know that there's a minimum requirement, I'm going to meet it to try to do everything I can to make sure that the diet I'm feeding didn't cause some of these degenerative diseases. May they still happen? Sure, they might, because of our environments, because of their genetics, because of a whole host of other factors. But if I can control the dietary component, I'm going to take that off the table as a potential contributing factor to some of these degenerative diseases.
Yeah, that's such a great answer. And it is so true, isn't it? And we live in a world where we have, what is the data? 60% of dogs are overweight. You have cancer all over the place right now. And it's like, it's getting worse. And that's the sad part of it. And people are saying, no, it's not, but it's getting worse. And, I don't know what the average lifespan of a dog is nowadays. There is not much data around that. But I see dogs all around me. I ran a doggy daycare and boarding business for 3 years, and I was seeing senior dogs passing at 10 or 11. And the reality is that was not the case when I was very little, and all our dogs in Italy were used to be fed fresh food. And that's the reality of it, isn't it? Yeah, it's just so incredibly important. And I think it's like, if you're feeding commercial, you've really got to know that full nutritional breakdown, our complete nutritional analysis. You've got to get that from the company in some way, shape, and form, especially if you've got a dog, like you said, that, could potentially have heart problems. Give me those information so that at least I can check that he's getting enough of this to make sure he doesn't become deficient. Because another thing is, it's really difficult to even test it, right? Like I think how many nutrients is 34 nutrients that dogs need, isn't it, in that diet?
I think so.
Yeah.
I never count them. I want them all.
Loads of them, basically. But it's just like, I ran a blood test, and the blood test tells you that moment in time. There is like the hair mineral analysis, but again, there is not many studies behind that yet. And so it's not that easy to even identify what that food is doing to them, which I think another reason why it's even more important to make sure that, we do it right in the first place, or we follow the basic guidelines in the first place. Another question I hear all the time and I see is, especially for people that formulate homemade diets or want to feed homemade, is that the FEDIAF and AAFCO guidelines were created for kibble, to develop basically kibble food as opposed to fresh food. And some people seem to think, do they actually need that much of each nutrient compared to looking at the fact that, these were established in the first place for companies to sell kibble or to create kibble with? What's your view on that?
Well, I think that criticism is partially valid because those nutrient profiles actually come from NRC, the National Research Council, and that's the body that collated all the studies that were done, the horrible studies that we never want to repeat again, like, what's the minimum amount of each nutrient we have to feed puppies so they don't die? Like, we don't ever want to do those studies again, right? Those were all looking at purified diets. Like, it wasn't real food. It was, how much of this synthetic nutrient do we have to put in so they don't die? To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any of those studies that outline how much do they need from fresh food. So could they need less from fresh food than what we see in NRC and in FEDIAF and in AAFCO? Maybe, but where are those numbers that tell us how much they need? If somebody does know where they are, I would love to see it. As far as I know, we don't have that information. We have some information on the ancestral diet, and some of the amounts are less than what's in NRC and some are more.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we have this dialed in to know for sure what is the appropriate amount of each nutrient in a fresh food diet as compared to kibble. I think we can make some comments about, and this is a whole nother can of worms. There are some people that say nutrients are nutrients. It doesn't matter where they come from, whether it's synthetic or natural food, this ingredient or that ingredient. I disagree with that because I think that when we feed whole foods, when we feed natural foods, we get a whole bunch of other things coming in besides just that nutrient. Some of which we know about, like the beautiful polyphenols in plants that have anti-cancer activity, anti-inflammatory activity. They might be liver supportive. They might be kidney supportive. All that is so wonderful, and I want all that. But what about all the stuff we don't even know about yet? Like, we talk about these essential nutrients that have to be provided in food. What if there are more that we haven't identified yet, but we get lucky and bring them along when we feed fresh food diets? So that's great. And I have no idea what the interplay is between those nutrients, the nutrients we don't even know about yet, and the essential nutrients that we have figured out. Is there some proportion ratio there? And maybe we're getting lucky there too. Like if we say, well, we have to have, 20 milligrams of zinc per 1,000 kcals, maybe there's some other mystery nutrient that comes along with zinc. And if we keep zinc at that level, we're also getting the right amount of this mystery nutrient. I don't know.
Yeah.
So to me, the best we have available right now is NRC did this research, set these minimums. I'm going to follow those because, again, I'm not comfortable with creating deficiencies, but I'm going to use food rather than synthetics wherever possible to meet those because of all the other things it brings with it. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't ever use synthetics. I totally do, especially for less active dogs. It's really hard to meet some nutrient needs just with whole foods. So again, I'm going to err on the side of caution and make sure I'm meeting that nutrient, even if I have to add a synthetic, because in my personal opinion, the criticisms about homemade diets are valid when people criticize, people drift from the recipe, they cut out steps, they cut out ingredients because it's just not convenient. So now we ended up with a diet that's deficient. In my opinion, that can be worse than an ultra processed diet that is complete and balanced.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That I totally agree with that. And this is the thing, I think it's like the problem is that people can't see it. And it can take, we don't know how long it takes. If a
Yeah.
dog doesn't eat zinc for, you don't add any zinc at all in that diet, and you feed that diet for like 12 months, you might not see the implication of that for 6 years until your dog randomly starts getting really poorly. But we don't, that's the problem. We don't know. And so everyone is just like, fine, they can survive, as long as they have fresh food. But we can't just bet on a dog's health like that when we have clear guidelines that tell us that. And I agree with you. If that needs to be the case, then I prefer to feed kibble, because then at least I know it's been formulated in a way that is complete and balanced by a company, or as much as possible complete and balanced based on FEDIAF or AAFCO, right? So
For active dogs.
for active,
Feed mouths for active dogs.
let's not forget that. But that is such an interesting point. That's one question I'm going to be asking all the time, and I'm going to kind of be spreading the word about. Yeah, it's not that I forgot about that, but there are so many layers to it that, and you're a big believer of that. So can you share a quick story about you worked with a dog that, came to you that wasn't a homemade diet before, but the diet was not complete and balanced? Have you ever had an experience that the dog was having some kind of symptoms of, needing to really be on a complete and balanced diet?
Yeah, I can think of a couple with GI symptoms, with chronic reflux, intermittent soft stools, or vomiting or nausea. And they were on homemade diets that had good ingredients, but were not complete and balanced. And so, in particular, missing choline again, and actually deficient in a couple of amino acids. And so, once we got the diet dialed in, and was it just meeting those nutrient needs, or was it also using different functional foods? I don't know. I can't tease out which of those, and maybe it was both of them together. But once they were on a diet that was customized for their needs and complete and balanced at their activity level, then those signs resolved. Certainly, I've had lots of other dogs where they had skin or hair coat issues, where, there was thinning fur, rough hair coat, or whatever, and that totally changed once they were on complete and balanced diets. There have been more striking examples, particularly going from commercial to complete and balanced homemade, dogs with heart disease. So again, I think it's that protein thing. When you're feeding a complete and balanced commercial kibble, but you're feeding it at less active levels, there is a very high likelihood that that's going to be protein deficient. And so those dogs with heart disease then eating a fresh food diet, so they're getting the benefit of fresh living food plus getting all their nutrient needs met. Those are the emails I get back from owners where they say, it's like he's a puppy again. I haven't seen the side of him in years, and he clearly feels so good now. And so that's what keeps me a believer in this, is those kinds of stories where you see this just massive turnaround in their health.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think at the end of the day, because you can either do trials where, you get loads of dogs and, that's cruel because, we don't want to really be doing that and it's going to be really expensive and no one really does it. Or you just have your clinical experience, dogs that you helped over the years, and they come back to you over and over again with new dogs because they just see the amazing work that a really good, balanced, complete and formulated by someone who they know what they're talking about diet can do to the dog health. Yeah, I love that. So one of the things, obviously, you mentioned a lot, we talked a lot about calories, right? But what I will say is there are 60% of dogs overweight. And, we know that possibly because all this commercial dog food. In fact, why is that? Why do you think dogs are overweight? I'm going to ask you.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's like I said, our choice right now with most commercial foods is either feed them enough nutrients and they're going to be fat because you're feeding too many calories, or feed them less and then they're nutrient deficient. But the other thing I didn't mention was sometimes you feed them less and then they're nutrient deficient and then they're fat anyway because their bodies aren't getting all the nutrients they need to do all their metabolic processes. So I have become convinced over watching dogs on diets for 30 years. I used to have clients come into the exam room with their hugely obese dog and say, Doc, listen, I swear to you, I'm feeding this dog a quarter cup of kibble a day. And it's like an 85-pound lab, right? And I'm like, at first I was like, you're such a liar. There's no way. But I heard this over and over and over. I didn't say that to their face. I was much kinder, but I was thinking it. But I heard this over and over and over again. So I was finally like, they can't all be lying. They can't all be lying. So I came to believe them. And so that has developed this belief that if we feed dogs, if we starve dogs, we're giving them so few calories and not enough nutrients, their bodies are just like in survival mode and they don't lose weight then either. They're either people are restricting calories because they don't want their dog to be fat. Totally get it. Being overweight comes with a whole host of health issues that they're trying to avoid. I'm on board. Or they're feeding the less, but their dog is still gaining weight or can't lose weight because it's just not getting all the building blocks that the body needs. So I think, unfortunately, in the commercial arena, we really don't have very many good options right now at all. Some of the veterinary prescription diets do get that right in terms of providing enough nutrients in a smaller calorie package, but the calorie guidance that's given with these diets is meet your goal and then go back to what you were doing before. Yeah. So then that creates this yo-yo dieting thing too, which is not ideal either. So all that to say, I just feel like consumers do not have many good choices, if any, in the commercial food realm right now to prevent this problem.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so the best choice in that, so I want my dog to lose weight. The safest choice, I guess, then would be to formulate a homemade recipe that really looks at the calories intake and making sure that they're not deficient in nutrients that they need. And you're right, because then it is you're feeding less and all the nutrients are missing in the body. The dog is taking it all over the place. And I feel what also can happen as well is the microbiome get messed up and you've got all sort of other problems. I have an interesting story that broke my heart. I used to run this doggy daycare and boarding business, and I had this cockapoo I looked after for many years. He was doing an elimination diet because he had allergies, right? And so the vet just said to the owner, just feed him this one protein can of food, which was kangaroo, which is like, novel protein. And so the owner went off. I looked after this dog just once a week, so I wasn't feeding him, right? And I said, he's losing weight. Every week I'm seeing him, he's like skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. It was already like a 20 pounds cockapoo, right? Then normally a bit, heavier than that. And anyway, I just went to work. I said, can you just show me the food that you give him? And I think he was like, based on the calories recommendation on the pack of the can, that dog was meant to be on like almost like 900 grams of that food a day, because it was a one, like protein, not very much in it from a nutrition perspective. It just, it's like kangaroo meat, minerals, vitamins, that's it. And so they were feeding this dog 300 grams a day. 3 weeks, and that dog was 7 kilo, which is, I don't know what it is in pounds, but it's like 3.5, I think it's half. And I was like, who told you to do that? And the vet, who, by the way, I am 1,000,000% sure they're trying to help.
Yes.
But you see, that created another set of issues, right? And the owner is just there listening to what the vet is saying because they trust the vet. And so I just wanted to share this with you to kind of I don't know if you got any comments to add on this. Just
to jump on what you said, that the vet was trying to help, and not one single word of what I have said here today would I have known earlier in practice. I didn't learn any bit of this in vet school, and I didn't learn it in practice. I didn't learn it until I learned how to formulate and I understood how diets were put together. It never occurred to me, and I too recommended just feed less to get your dog to lose weight, because that's what was out there. That's what all the expert guidance was, just decrease calories. And so it's understandable why vets would recommend that. That's the only guidance they've been given. It's understandable why no one is thinking about this, vets or pet parents, because none of the food companies actually understand this either, because AAFCO in no way makes it clear that delivering adequate nutrition depends on the amount of food that's eaten. They don't ever tie that to their guidelines. And so they're not providing any guidance on adequately nourishing dogs. So everybody's out there with these blinders on, not really understanding how it works and making recommendations based on all they know. And that's why it's backfiring, because the whole story isn't out there.
Yes, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So if I'm a dog owner now and I'm feeding a commercial dog food, right? And I, what is the best thing I can do, to make sure that I do more research, I ask better questions to the food company? Because we have, from what it sounds like, we have this issue with every single possible company. So are there any specific questions? Obviously, one is, can you give me a full nutritional analysis? But obviously, as an owner, I would need to go to ADF. I would need to have a license with ADF. I don't think people will do it personally, unless they work with a nutritionist that understands the tool and things like that. So what can an owner do if, I've got a dog overweight and I want them to lose weight in a safe way? What's your best advice? And I'm not asking you to oversimplify it, because, I understand that it can be oversimplified.
Yeah.
But in a way that they don't get too overwhelmed and just not do anything.
So the first thing I'll say is, if somebody out there is really mathy, you can do it yourself without spending a dime. You don't have to have an ADF subscription. You don't have to consult with a nutritionist. You can evaluate whether your dog's diet is providing adequate nutrients. FEDIAF makes their nutritional guidelines free, downloadable, just right there on the internet. So download them. You'll see what the nutrient requirements are per metabolic body weight, and you can figure out, if the company provides a complete nutritional analysis, whether your dog is consuming enough of each nutrient in their allotted daily portion. So you can do it on your own. It's a lot of work, but you can do it. So secondly, if you're not mathy and you're not going to have an ADF subscription, you're not going to consult with somebody who can help you evaluate the diet, the the next thing that you could do if your dog needs to lose a substantial amount of weight is you might consider doing a veterinary prescription diet for weight loss, because like I said, they actually are formulated to deliver adequate nutrients in a smaller package. Now, you're not going to be on that forever. And so then you're going to be faced with, okay, now what do I do once I get my dog down to the accurate weight range? And you're still going to have to wrestle with this, how to pick a good diet then. But hopefully then there would be a commercial option available for you that would meet those needs. If you can't do any of those things, the bare minimum that I would do is look for a diet that's high in protein so that at least you're not protein deficient. Your dog's not protein deficient during weight loss. Now, this gets a little dicey as well, because you can't just look at the guaranteed analysis and have a clear view of what's high protein and what's not. The first thing is moisture content matters. So if you pick up any bag of kibble, the protein's going to look super high. Well, that's because there's almost no moisture in the food, right? And you pick up a canned food and it's going to look like the protein's really low because there's so much moisture in the food. You look at a fresh food diet, like a fresh raw food diet, the protein's going to look medium. Again, there's a ton of moisture in that food. So if we compare all of those on a dry matter basis, usually what happens is the fresh food meat-based diet is going to have the highest protein, the canned is going to be next, and the kibble is going to be lowest, even though it didn't look like that just looking at the label. So if you can ascertain what the actual protein content is on a dry matter basis and look for something that's quite high, and by quite high, I mean on a dry matter basis, 45 to 50% at least. Yeah, because their requirement is that much higher when it's coming in a small calorie package. So that's kind of bare minimum. But again, then we're potentially giving up all those other nutrients. And maybe that's what you have to do on the short term if you can't engage with somebody to assess a diet or formulate a diet for you, or if you can't do prescription weight loss food short term. At bare minimum, cover those protein bases.
Yes, amazing. There is a calculator online for this. I'm going to put in the link when the episode goes live for people to be able to do that. So that's amazing. And if someone wants to, listen to this quote today and wants to work with someone, like we didn't really say who Animal Diet Formulator are, and we said what your role is within it. But who is Animal Diet Formulator, and what do you help with as a company?
Yeah. So that scary spreadsheet that Steve Brown developed, he sold to the owners of Animal Diet Formulator, and they made it into this cloud-based, more intuitive formulation tool that is much easier to use than Steve's scary spreadsheet. So that's where Animal Diet Formulator came from. And so it is a software, and we have subscriptions for individual pet parents, for professionals like veterinarians or nutritionists, and for commercial companies. So we have all sorts of different people using the software to create complete and balanced diets for dogs and cats. It is geared towards fresh food diets, but we actually do have some users using it for kibble and other types of other forms of food. So, and that's because what it does is it provides the framework for when I add this ingredient, here are the nutrient levels on a caloric basis. So again, ascertaining, do I have enough of this nutrient per calorie, which is where the importance comes in here, not just this is a source of protein. Okay, well, how much protein in the calories? So the formulator puts all that together for you, and it actually gives you some tools to help you balance a diet if you don't know how to do that on your own. Like you're like, I have no idea what ingredient to choose to get magnesium. Okay, well, the formulator will help you do that and will help you fine tune amounts. So you can use it on your own. Or I do the consultations for Animal Diet Formulator. And so that's how we met, Gaia. We did a consultation for Rusty and his diet. So I help individuals, professionals, and commercial companies with their diets. So that can be a diet that you formulated on your own and you'd like me to review it and fine tune it. Or maybe you don't want to touch formulation on your own at all. And you just say, this is my dog's story. I need a diet to address these things. What can we do? And then we can work together to make a diet to meet your dog's needs.
Yeah, and what I loved about it is I did kind of a little bit of mix of both. I really wanted to learn about it. I was getting overwhelmed with it like 3 years ago, and I was like, I'm just going to book a consultation, and you give me loads of knowledge and suggestions and things I had to I had so many questions, I remember, but you were amazing. So even as a tool that you can kind of just talk to you to just learn more about it and get clarity on it so that then you can go off and use the tool on your own. I absolutely love it. And I think, and I think there are just not that many out there that can do that. One question that I think people might have as well is, can people, because obviously the companies is based in the US and the ingredients are US based, but then you have something called typicals. If I'm from Italy or the UK and I want to formulate a diet with ingredients that I buy here in the UK, does the ingredient database limit those people or can it do that basically?
Yeah, we do have users from around the world. So the ADF typicals, they're not like a different ingredient that you would look for in the store. What they are is, so let's take chicken dark meat as an example. USDA, the US based food database, does have a bunch of different entries for chicken dark meat, but there are also entries in New Zealand and Australia and some European food databases. And so ADF Typicals looks at all of those data points and aggregates them and analyzes them and creates a more typical or a more representative nutrient profile that would account for some of that natural nutrient variability. And it will always err on the side of caution. So for example, in that chicken dark meat, if the taurine levels in 15 out of 20 of those entries are at a certain level, but there's a couple that are sky high in comparison, we look at that and we're like, is it really? Because not all lab tests are accurate. There can be errors, right? So we look at those, we throw those out, and we say, this is probably more the area that things are in. And so then the typicals will take into account things like that. So we recommend using the typicals whenever you can. They're also complete. So USDA never gives an iodine. They never give a choline, a chloride. Sometimes they don't give a choline. ADF typicals have nutrient values for every essential nutrient. Additionally, you can also create your own custom ingredients. So if by chance you have found an ingredient entry that gives you information about your specific ingredient, you can create your own custom ingredient in ADF so that you can use that nutrient data, and you can ask our support team for help with that as well if you need assistance doing that. So you can add ingredients that are more representative of what's actually going in your dog's food bowl, even if ADF doesn't have them in the greater database as a whole.
Love that. But does that mean that if I have it here in the UK, let's say that I found someone who sell a company that created kind of like a base mineral and vitamin mix, and they give me this specific grams or percentages, whatever of each, whatever ingredient is in there, right? Like minerals and vitamins. But I can insert the exact amount and then I can select that, and based on the other whole food ingredients, then it will link it all together. That's very good.
Yes. So you're not limited at all. You can use whatever ingredients you want.
Yes. No, that's amazing. I love that. I will put a link in the show notes of ADF anyway. Have I ever forgotten anything? Have I forgotten to ask you anything that you want to add? Sorry, I know we're overrun a little bit, but I love
that's okay. Yeah, no, this has been a great talk. I always think of things later like, oh, I should have said this and I should have talked about that. But I think we covered a lot of ground.
We did, honestly. I think it's the basic, isn't it? And I think the biggest takeaway for me is, I feel like there is so much confusion, and it can be simpler if you know who can help you with specific things, right? Like I feel like sometimes people are a little bit skeptic about going off and, I don't want to pay, $500 to formulate a recipe, but it's not always the case. And you'll be surprised how much you actually can achieve from, getting the right info, or maybe getting a recipe formulated without having to spend like a crazy amount of money. And then you can really feel confident you're doing the right thing. And your dog doesn't get harmed in the long term.
Yeah. And that might look like not necessarily coming away with 10 recipes, but maybe it looks like coming away with 1 or 2 recipes and the knowledge of which recipes not to use that could cause a problem. So, getting options is great, but also narrowing down and knowing what your options are not is just as useful in that situation.
Absolutely. I did think of another question I had for you, which is a very common question in the UK, especially nowadays, about between raw feeding and gently cooked diet. So, and that was kind of one of my concerns as well, and I wanted to hear your kind of view on that. If I want to make a home diet and I want to feed it raw to my dog, but I'm buying the meat from my local butcher or supermarket, what is your view around? Do you recommend dog owners to limit the risk, obviously, of contamination and things like that, to feed it raw? Or because I feel like a lot more confident when I feed Rusty commercially formulated raw food, because I know they actually giving me the information. They're doing lots of tests for bacterial contamination, and that's constant on every batch. But home feeding, right? If you just go to the butcher and buy meat that is meant to be cooked for humans, you don't necessarily get that. What is your view on that, based on your experience?
Yeah, so it depends on the dog and the person. You know, it depends on your own comfort level. It depends on the dog's circumstances. Like, are we worried about immunocompromise in this dog? Does this dog have cancer, or is it on any medications that would compromise its immune system? So there are a number of factors that go into that decision for me. For myself, I feed my own dogs raw food from the grocery store, from the butcher, and I feel confident in that because I know what their health status is and I know what their immune function is, and I'm okay with that. If I were worried about it, I could cook the food. I could also do things like choose whole cuts rather than ground meat, so then there's going to be less surface area contamination. So there are a number of different ways I could approach that, but I guess where I always come down is there's not a one size fits all. And some dogs do better on raw food, some dogs do better on cooked food. So, you know, looking at all those things, I take all of those things into consideration. And the avian influenza situation that has been very prevalent here in the States was another layer of that with a safety question. And I have 2 cats who eat raw food diets, and they will only eat poultry. They won't eat anything else. So they'll eat turkey, chicken, and duck. And one of my cats will not eat it cooked. She would rather starve to death than eat cooked food. So I sat her down when this all started, and it's the one who was right here on my keyboard. And I said, Sarah, listen, you are choosing to eat raw poultry, and I cannot protect you from avian influenza if you're going to do this. And she said, I got it covered, Mom. And so that's, you know, she's been eating technically higher risk food because of that, but she wouldn't eat otherwise. So I guess I say that just to say every situation is different. I think it's hard to identify one ideal because it depends on so many different factors in the equation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's like there is always a risk with raw in general, right? Like, but you just sometimes you just decide to take that risk as an owner. And you know, for me is when I look at the benefit, like Rusty's always done really well on raw. I move him to gently cooked. He starts getting ear infections, eye infection. It just doesn't work for him, gently cooked. It's nothing I can do. You know, I've tried many different companies cooking the food that, you know, we formulated. It just didn't work, you know, at the end of the day, and he doesn't enjoy it as much. And, you know, you have to make that decision. It's okay. There is a small risk. I am taking it. But then what's the, you know, what would be the, you know, like solution to that? You know, I'm not going to feed, you know, just more ultra processed food. And, you know, I want to keep him on a fresh diet. And, you know, I think there is a risk with everything in life. If I feed him kibble, it will get inflamed. You know, I said, then you need to make a judgment call and, you know, do what's best, like you said, for your cat, right?
Yeah.
For their life. Yeah.
And when people always, I'll get this question a lot. I want to feed my dog the best diet. Can you formulate the best diet? And my response is always like, okay, what are your goals? And they're like, the best diet. Well, but what does that mean to you? Does that mean all whole foods, no synthetics? Does that mean cooked? Does that mean raw? Does that mean high caloric density, low caloric? There are so many factors here. There is no one best food. It just depends. Yeah.
And another thing people forget about is what works for a dog that might not work for another. Every single dog is different. I had a little cavalier like Rusty coming to me, and, you know, he was always sick. So if he was fed raw, like his immune system was really compromised. 2 same dogs, same breed, you know, but they're not the same. And so what worked for Rusty will have not worked for. And so that's why that's the danger of, you know, following a vital line, because people just tend to share a lot their experiences with their own dog and are like, okay, yeah, turmeric, you know, golden paste, let's go and add it to my dog. Oh, my dog got sick from that. But that's what we need to understand. It's like as humans, like you might be able to eat pasta all the time, or maybe me because I'm Italian. And then I give it to someone else and like you get sick from it or you get bloated. And it's literally the same with dogs, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that's what
totally.
we don't normally get. You know, it's so important to remember. Yeah.
Yes.
But thank you for the lovely chat. Absolutely loved it.
I've enjoyed every second. Thank you, Gaia.
Likewise. You know, I tell you what, maybe it would be nice in a couple of months if you'd be up for it. Maybe we could do like a little demo of ADF, or even with my account, just to share with people how to do it. Because for me, my biggest outcome is, you know, just sharing with people they can do it in a healthy way, and sharing with them that it can be done, and it's not that impossible to achieve. And I'm a dog owner, right? Yes, I've got my qualification, whatever, but I'm not a vet and I haven't been formulating for like many years at all. So maybe like we could just do like a little test together and then, just show people that it doesn't have to be that impossible to achieve.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love it.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much to the audience for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to DAFY, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.